Welcome to Exceptional Leaders, Exceptional Ideas. I'm Keith Weiss, the head of Morgan Stanley's U.S. software research team, and I'm honored to be speaking with two outstanding executives, Satya Nadella, CEO of Microsoft, and Rob Rooney, the head of technology, operations, and firm resilience at Morgan Stanley. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. The pandemic has accelerated the shift to a more digital workplace, so what better way to talk through these changes than to draw on the perspectives of both the world's largest software developer and a large user of that technology. Satya, let me start with you. As the crisis unfolded, what does the CEO do to quickly address the challenges of ensuring continuity for Microsoft, the safety of your employees, and ultimately the needs of your customers?
First of all, it's great, Keith, to be with you and Rob. And you're absolutely right. These are, unprecedented times, and what we've been through in the last year is, one of those classic tail events that none of us could have anticipated. And but yet, here we are, and I in fact think that it is thanks, in part at least, to some of the technology that we have that has helped us sustain the level of connection and productivity in spite of the constraints. So from a Microsoft perspective, the first thing that we needed to ensure was our own employee safety. And so that's why we made sure that we had very flexible remote work policies as soon as the pandemic spread around the world. But the other part, Keith, was we were also digital first responders to all the first responders out there. Whether it was in the hospitals and the frontline health workers needed us to be really serving them as they served customers. Same thing with education and remote education and government. So our first priority was to, in fact, ensure that our services stood up to even surge demand and really helped all the companies and partners that we were working with.
Rob, we're now a year into the pandemic. From an organizational and operational perspective, looking back, what do you think worked well as the firm transitioned to remote work and moved to new ways to service its clients?
Thanks, Keith, and Satya, thanks for joining us, and thanks as well to you, because you and your team and your colleagues at Microsoft were a big part of how we successfully navigated the pandemic ourselves. But as Satya already said, this was not something we could have anticipated. But from our perspective here at Morgan Stanley, we do have a culture of resilience. We need to always be on. We can't go down. And you don't do anything well if you don't practice. So there's a lot of proper prior planning that's been going on here, a lot of practice. Of course, the real world throws a lot of opportunities to practice resilience at you, whether they are blizzards or tsunamis or cyber attacks or even good old-fashioned tech outages. So we have a long culture of diving into those, responding to those, learning from those, and the investments that we've made in our infrastructure have paid off extremely well. But the other big part, and what I think is probably the most noticeable success story for most of our employees, how we got 95% of our staff home in a hurry, was really all the collaboration tools that largely the tech team had invested in. For us, 2020 was not just a year where we had to get people home, but it was a record year for the firm with record volumes. We bought a terrific company called E-Trade. We did all of that from home, and we're very, very pleased with how well that's worked out.
Satya, I wanted to ask you about the pace of change coming out of this crisis. Very early on during COVID, you made comments about seeing 2 years worth of digital transformation in 2 months. Why was the crisis such a large catalyst for driving digital transformation in your customers?
Yeah, a couple of things, Keith. First, there was this tail event, and we all turned collectively to essentially digital technology for core resilience, right? In fact, we used to talk a lot about digital transformation before, and then it suddenly became core priority for any organization was to be in the cloud in order to stay in business, right? So it didn't even become like, hey, this is sort of a transformation project that I need to allocate and prioritize. But it just said, look, well, I won't exist if I'm not in the cloud. That was true for government organizations, schools, hospitals, and manufacturing, pick your sector. So that was the one real qualitative change, I think, coming out of this is that understanding that your productivity depends on being at the cutting edge of technology, because that's what gives you resilience, is one market structural change. Then let's think about it, right? Like take healthcare. We've talked about telemedicine forever. Guess what? No, there's no going back, right? Next time we want an outpatient visit, it'll start with an AI triage tool, then a telemedicine visit, and then you'll go to outpatient ward. So therefore, and you can say retail, curbside pickup is going to be a norm. Manufacturing, this notion that you have to have a digital twin that does lights out manufacturing of a remote facility is going to be a norm. So I think there's going to be real structural change coming out of this, which is going to accelerate, right? So I always said tech industry, for all its sort of, strength and penetration, is still just 5% of GDP. So I always say, okay, as world's COGS become more digital and world's OPEX is getting productivity boost because of digital, it'll double. And I think that the doubling may happen faster because of the need for any company to be competitive. They need to be able to actually build their own digital capability on a much faster clip.
Satya, 2020 was a year of rising importance for collaboration software, and Microsoft clearly illustrated a focus and strong strategic positioning in this area with the rapid increase in adoption and engagement of Teams. While most investors look at Microsoft as targeting the world's knowledge workers, Teams has been working more broadly to connect frontline workers with solutions like Office 365 and Power Platform. What's the strategic importance of making these digital connections between knowledge workers and frontline workers?
Yeah, no, first of all, Keith, it was out of even necessity right now, right? For example, if you have a frontline person, but let's say an engineer working from home, how do they connect? And it's interestingly enough, Teams has become the backplane, which has allowed companies to be resilient and available to their customers and continue operations because of the fact that you have this communications channel. And the other thing, Keith, Teams is sort of got multiple things built in. For example, it has synchronous communications like the one that you and I now are sort of engaged in, which is a video conference. It also has asynchronous communications, which is chat. It also has the scaffolding for collaborating on documents, the Office documents, as well as business process. So you can whether integrate one of the business applications like Dynamics 365 or others, or build your own line of business apps, which what a lot of frontline workers use on a daily basis. It's some custom inventory tracking line of business application they may have. And that is, or like an inventory tracking app for N95 masks in a hospital. Those are all classic Power Apps. And the interesting thing is the consumption of those apps is happening right in Teams. And so we've now seen a fantastic sort of circuit here, which is Teams, Power Apps, and Azure DB, because after all, the storage system for all the Power Apps is our database technology. So really it just perhaps more so than anything else shows the need for a comprehensive stack versus point tools.
Got it. Rob, can you talk to us about some of the challenges of increasing the pace of change in a large, very regulated, and very security-focused organization like Morgan Stanley?
Well, you said it, Keith. It's hard, right? There's absolutely no question. And it's all of the things you mentioned, regulation, the focus on cyber and data security. It's what I mentioned before. We're always on. Our wealth management business is on 24/7. Our institutional securities business has to be open for business on Monday morning Sydney time and not close until after New York on Friday night. So we have to have world-class engineers on the front line innovating every day. We have to support them with things like our centers of excellence, our innovation offices, our labs. But really what you're talking about is our vendor partnerships, and those are absolutely critical. They were always important. They're even more critically important today. And I'd say that the key is for our tech vendor partners to understand those things that we have to deal with. We have certain cyber protocols we have to abide by. We have data security is one of our most important aspects. And so I think for our partners to come in understanding that and the complexity of our business is super helpful. If you're a small tech partner, you need to understand how our platform works that you're trying to sell to. But if you're a big tech partner, really the opportunity is, like I just said, a partnership. And if somebody's coming in and trying to sell us products within silos, that's probably not going to work very well. If somebody can look at the firm comprehensively, help us look at ourselves front to back, and solve our problems in a connected up way, it's really, really going to help Morgan Stanley move forward.
It's a very great point. I mean, in fact, one of the things that you have to really do is you have to have a principled approach. I mean, take cyber. One of the fundamental things that you have to know and ensure in the core engineering practice of our products and also the operational security posture that Microsoft has, we take the principles of zero trust and ensure, to Rob's earlier point, every product we build, how do we ensure that they all come together in the context of any given customer's zero trust posture, right? So there's, sometimes in cyber you can sort of say, oh, I do a great job in endpoint protection. But, you got to really think about, hey, how do attacks propagate? Your endpoint, your identity, your app security, and data security all need to come together. So I would say first thing we try to do, whether it's cyber, whether it's AI ethics, or whether it's internet safety, these are all the major issues that are driving trust. So to me, being able to sort of make sure that we have the best engineering processes, the best operational security, and then the resources to work with one customer at a time in partnership to ensure that they get there. I thought Rob said it well. You just can't say, hey, look, just move to the new. You got to understand the environment. You got to understand how to go secure that environment first where it is and then have a migration plan. And so that's the hard work that one needs to do as a platform vendor, both for ourselves and our customers.
Rob, one of the things I keep hearing about across many organizations is that overall productivity has been good in the work from home environment. However, elements of creative collaboration, community amongst team members, and the idea generation from ad hoc interactions appears much harder to sustain.
Keith, it's undeniable that productivity was off the charts in 2020, and we talked about all the things that happened here and at so many organizations in an incredibly intense year. So I don't think you can deny the high levels of productivity, thanks again to so many of the tools that we had in place, including many of the tools that Satya is talking about himself. But at the same time, I think you have to ask yourself a question: is it sustainable? Is it good for our culture? I think at Morgan Stanley we feel pretty strongly here that we are, our best place where we get our best work done is kind of in person. We are a people-centric organization, a client-centric organization. So I think that's really powerful. I think we should all feel pretty good as humans that all human interaction is unlikely to be replaced by technology. I think that's a pretty important thing to acknowledge.
Satya, the hallmark of your tenure at Microsoft has been pushing change in the organization, opening the walled gardens, breaking down silos within the organization, and encompassing a broader mission beyond just making money.
Keith, I've always gone back to two pillars, which is the sense of purpose and mission, right? I mean, even asking the core question of why does the firm exist? What is your purpose? If you disappeared, would anybody even miss you? And how are you aligned, not just sort of on the ESG side, but quite frankly at the business model side, when you're doing well, are small businesses becoming more productive, large multinational partners of yours becoming more competitive, public sector becoming more efficient, health outcomes, education outcomes. I mean, I'll give you one example. Just think about it. There are more software engineers now outside of the tech industry. That means digital as sort of input, whether it's through OpEx productivity or COGS use, is going to be pervasive in all of the economy. And we are an original tools company, right? So to take pride in what we do well and making sure, like it's not like even in the partnership with Morgan Stanley, it's not about Morgan Stanley using any of our tools or technologies. It's about Morgan Stanley's own digital capability, right? In its own right. That's what we take pride in.
I wanted to end the conversation with a couple of thoughts on leading through adversity. From your own perspective, what skills, experiences, or investments have served you and the company well during the crisis and as you chart out the course out of this pandemic?
Keith, I think, Satya touched on it. We've talked about it a few times in this conversation. It really comes down to culture. I think we've been extremely fortunate here at Morgan Stanley to have a remarkably strong culture built over many years. I think if you didn't have that going into this crisis, you would have really struggled. You can't build it on the fly. So I think that culture is what certainly inspired our employees to dive in. We made a declaration early in the year, as you know, that we would protect people's jobs for all of 2020. They just did not need one more thing to worry about. I think that went down exceptionally well. I think we responded responded to some of the tragic events that we saw in May and June in the United States and made some big moves, including establishing the Institute for Inclusion. So I think our employees have rallied around the firm's values, and that certainly, I think, contributed massively to how successfully we navigated the pandemic.
That same thing happened here, which is what 150,000 people at Microsoft were really there in the initial phases as the digital first responders to all the first responders. And I kind of look at it and say, why did they do that? Like, what motivated everyone to be there and during tough times when they themselves had many constraints? I think it goes back to that reinforcement of why does the firm exist? Why does the company exist? What is its mission? What is its criticality? I love that Colin Mayer definition of the social contract of a company, right, where he talks about it's about finding profitable solutions to the challenges of people and planet. I feel that Microsoft did a good job over this pandemic now, and we now need to keep continuing to remind ourselves that that's the reason why we exist, to find profitable solutions to the challenges of people and planet. And as long as we do that, we're in good shape.
Satya, Rob, thank you very much for joining us. This has truly been an outstanding conversation, and we really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Keith. Thanks so much, Rob.
Thanks, Satya. Thanks, Keith.